Alrighty. Senator Neal, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me out of your busy schedule and a very busy week for both the Commonwealth and Louisville. So I want to start this at least by looking back a little bit over the 2025 session that we had this year. A lot of different takeaways from it. What do you think were some positives and some negatives that may have come out of the session this year?
Well, we did some things I thought was good. You got to keep in mind that this is, some people refer to it as a cleanup session. It's a short session. You try to take care of things that you didn't get done in the long session because they alternate each year. But I think we did some good things, like in artificial intelligence. I thought we did well there to get started on that track because that's going to be a journey in and of itself. We dealt with trying to eliminate or minimize distractions in the classrooms with the cell phone legislation, controlling that factor. It amazed me it took us so long to get there, but I thought it was good that we did that. And we did some things that I thought were pretty good in the financial literacy area. I thought that was very positive. That's another one of those things that I always question, why do we not emphasize that piece? That's a very fundamental piece, and for some reason it always would drop off the scene. But this time we went down that road, so that was pretty good. I thought it was good in that. There's some things that were concerning. It's concerning that we're making easier this trail down to zero with respect to the tax structure. In other words, we had 6%. Now we apparently at least focus on going to zero. We're not a Florida. We can't do the same thing. Kansas went down that road, had to go back and back up. But the thing that's concerning about me is not that. It's that there's no research that supports that anywhere, that it creates an economic outcome. And secondly, we are not saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. If you go left or we do go right, it's just being sold on the front end. And I think it's good to have everything on the table and to plan for those things so people know what they're getting into. Because clearly, at the end of the day, when you do that, you're going to have to either compromise resources, programs that people rely on and probably take for granted, and or you're going to have to find other resources such as sales taxes that people may not appreciate, which is a regressive tax in and of itself. So that gives me concern. And then they did this DEI, this anti-DEI thing, which I thought we blew an opportunity, because we, like sycophants, running behind Trump's questionable commitment along all kinds of lines, including race. We run down the line to follow what the national piece is in that regard. Just think about this just for a second. We're about no child. We started off no child left behind. Think about this for a minute in K-12. We're talking about post-secondary education and institutions that are creative, that are fully supported, and we want diversity in thought and interaction. If you don't disagree with it, so what? That's part of the mix that makes it vibrant, and it gives everybody a voice. It helps us to understand what's going on. But what do? We go down this road of let's bury history, let's suppress thought, let's not support students in ways that we've already said no child is left behind. It's contradictory because we blindly, in my view, follow a very ill-founded and unsubstantiated initiative that really flows from the Trump. It's coordinated nationally, and we fell into that trap. We blew an opportunity to actually double down on our support for our students, wrap our arms around them to make them a better, productive outcome for the future. But the good news with respect to that is that it's not going to do that. It's not going to do that. It's going to hurt some folks along the way. We're going to have to find ways of interacting in different other ways because we're a vibrant people, and I mean collectively. We are in this together. We must find ways to do that. We must be part of making this a more perfect union because that's what this experiment is all about. So I'm optimistic about that.
So you mentioned the anti-DEI bill, House Bill 4. I noticed throughout the session that you spoke vehemently against that bill many times. You alluded to this a little bit in your answer there, but What happens next after this? That bill's been passed, it's going to have its effect and do what it does. Where does the conversation, dialogue, the issue go from here?
Well, like I say, it's about opportunity. And something my father told me when I was about 14 and just stuck in my head. He said, all circumstances offer an opportunity. He said, look for the opportunity. In other words, instead of just reacting negatively, and it does affect people that way, some people will react that way. From my perspective, I'm looking for the opportunity. And the opportunities are what? Double down on what you need, evaluate what you need, build those things in that support those things that you lose by the action that compromises that. And, that's a fun journey all by itself. That's a reason for people to interact and to engage. That's a reason to elevate those issues and those supports that people need, and not only that, those conversations people need to have. That gives an opportunity to rearrange your relationships and to strengthen relationships in ways you haven't even thought that you were getting comfortable with under other circumstances. So nothing ends unless you think that it ends. The idea is to continue on what you think is important to do, and you create those opportunities.
On the income tax cut, the concerns that you have there, what would be some indicators to you that would effectively show that this may not be working?
Well, it's not that I'm saying it may not be working. I don't know that. The future holds that particular piece. I'm hopeful it'll work and serve all the things that we're being told about it. And, I'm not a naysayer type, but it struck me that when I began my research, when we do something huge like that, I start researching. And I could not find a thing that supported that if you did this, these are the kinds of outcomes you would get. So I started asking experts, economists, and so forth, and they were saying the same thing to me. They said there's no magic bullet with respect to this sort of thing. Then I said to myself, well, okay, there are clearly potential consequences. In fact, real consequences in a situation. Well, consequences, I don't necessarily mean negative. Maybe it's an opportunity. But where does opportunity lead? Clearly, either there are going to be services you don't provide, or you're going to have to find another stream of money to provide services or to sustain services you have. And then I noticed that there was no robust discussion about that, and there's a robust discussion about this. I don't think that's the way you should do policy. I mean, particularly when you do major policy. So my approach to it has been to ring a bell. Come on, folks, we talk about this. So I challenge my colleagues in that particular area. It's not a condemnation. It's not a criticism, other than I think we fall short from a policy standpoint. And I'm looking at it from the best possible angle I could, that this is not serving some particular interest in our society, which it very well may be, by design and or by happenstance. I don't know. I'm taking it for face value. So we need to have a robust discussion now about what we're doing. We're now at going down to 3.5 or getting ready to implement that particular piece. We just made it by this particular session easier to incrementally approach that particular piece. We did a good thing when we put a trigger in there, so if certain conditions didn't result, we stopped there so it wouldn't have an adverse effect. But I must let folks know that we've already lost over $2 billion that we didn't collect, that we'll never get back. At least I think we'll never get back. So that means we lost opportunity as well. So there's a lot to be said here. This is big stuff, and we'd have to see, and it's going to affect everybody in one way or another.
Well, as we start looking ahead to the next session next year, we're going to have the interim start here in about a month or so. Any early ideas of some issues that you particularly may want to explore or may become part of the Senate Democrat platform next year?
Well, next year and every year, the central policy piece, the central moral document that we focus on, that we're here to do, is the budget. I mean, it boils down to that people ask me that question. There's all these little things that are great. There's all other kinds of things we need to fix. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the budget. What do we support? What do we fuel? How do we use our limited resources what resources are we going to hold back for the future? I mean, we got a robust amount of money in unprecedented in reserve, so to speak. So I'm always looking at the budget, and that's an evolving piece. And one of the areas that I think we need to revisit and really give some serious considerations in the area of education. You know, some reports and some research indicates that we are functioning at the 2008 level in terms of funding education. Well, education is our key. It is the key to almost everything in terms of what we do and how we move forward. So we need to make sure that we're robustly supporting education, all its facets that are relevant. And if that's true, and there are great signs that we have not stepped up to the plate as far or to the extent we should, then that's going to be a big issue again. I think from a budgetary standpoint, again, we got to look at that. Now, we've done some good things. Don't get me wrong. We've done some good things. We went back and tried to deal with the pension situation, but that doesn't translate to what happens in the classroom. So we have to make sure that we revisit that issue, I think, and make sure that we are putting sufficient resources into that to help us move forward as a society and make Kentucky the number one state and not the number 47th or 48th state.
Do you think the increases that were made to Seek in the budget last year, I don't remember the exact percentages, I want to say ballpark 3%, then 6% in the following year, those increases to Seek, were they enough or should they be more?
Well, it's a little more complex than that. You know, it gets into how funds are utilized in districts and what's supplementing what. So that's a lengthy technical discussion if you really get into it. I can give you a general response to it. I will go back to my original statement. I don't think that we've adequately funded education, and we need to evaluate that and make sure that we tie things where they need to be. We need to listen to the districts to make sure that we know what they need with respect to going forward, et cetera. So that's a little more, it's a complex response for something like that. We need to evaluate, and I would suggest we need more funding in various areas of our education system.
Would even reforming the Seek formula be something that you'd be open to exploring?
I'm open to everything. I think it's, see, I have no problems with looking at anything. I think you do look at things. Circumstances change. You learn from experience. To do that, you have to revisit perhaps what you're doing because you've learned certain things. So it's always good to evaluate anything that you're doing. I have no fear for that. What I do have concern about when you evaluate is that opens the book for not only the protagonist but the antagonist. That's the nature of our system. So you got to be got to put on your I don't know why I'm using this term, big boy pants, and do what you got to do, to make things work well for everybody. This is an experiment. This is a journey. This is about making things better. And, some people make it better for some and not for others. I'm about uplifting. So let's evaluate. Now, I can't point any of my colleagues and say they're not for uplifting, but let's look and see what we do with policy and see if it uplifts. And I think that's a good thing to do.
I want to talk a little bit about national news, or at least national news that is affecting the Commonwealth in a way. I'm sure that you've heard plenty about all of the controversy around tariffs, and I don't want to, go too deep into that whole. I mean, it's a very broad issue.
No, let's go deep on this one.
Well, I mean, I know that it's going to be affecting Churchill Downs' own renovations. I saw a report recently that they're going to have to put a pause on that. Just your general thoughts about now that you're seeing the effect some of these policies are having on Kentucky's own industries. How does the General Assembly respond, and what sort of tools would even be available to you to respond?
Well, I would suggest it's a conundrum for the majority in Kentucky because now we have someone of the same party, President Trump, who in the heck knows what the heck he's doing. He's created a whole atmosphere of uncertainty, number one, and you can't plan well in business when you have a situation like that. But on top of it, he starts off with what? Tariffs. Tariffs to our best friends that are out there. Whoa, what is that about? Particularly when you understand that by implementing tariffs, that puts a burden on our own local economy and people that are involved in that. And the president was running around like we're gonna charge them, when any fool or anybody that knew what this was about knew that was gonna translate in higher prices for ourselves. So let's start with bourbon. Let's start with bourbon. Bourbon they took the bourbons off the shelves in Canada, one of our best neighbor, or one of them on one side of us. Think about that. They raised taxes or tariffs with respect to our allies in Europe, and now they said, well, whoa, okay, well, we're going to have to fight back on that particular regard. Why do we want that? Now, that's not going to affect all of the bourbon industry, but guess what? There's all kinds of people affected in the bourbon industry. You're not just talking about the bottle that sits on the shelf full of bourbon. You're talking about the bottle that bourbon is in and how it's manufactured. You're talking about the barrels that they store the bourbon in to age with respect to that. You're talking about the sales mechanism. You're talking about the liquor stores in terms of their ability to sell with respect to this particular regard. You're talking about those who are dealing in the international market and opening up new avenues with respect to things that come back and benefit our own economy, being affected, putting things on pause. Let me tell you, I wake up every morning asking my wife, I said, what has Trump done next? You see? And I'd look at this thing. I probably saw more intense in this area than in any area because of its effect on Kentucky. And that's just on bourbon. So think about the overall economy in terms of tariffs with respect to that. Think about the relationship with China. Look here, I have no doubt about the international geopolitics that we have to deal with. Obviously, you have to do that. But think about it. We got car parts that we have to get from China. Look, Trump is backing up down on his initial piece because he misstepped, quite frankly, not characterizing that way, because we have to raise costs on cars because of things that we can't get here. So it's sort of a backwards way of doing things as opposed to taking measured steps moving forward and building toward a strong economy. He just throws an axe and a hatchet in there and brings in some guy that's a billionaire that's probably an expert in certain areas and probably not in another area. And now what do we have? We have uncertainty that's affecting all aspects. We got fear from individuals on various levels, not just the economic business community, but it translates all the way down into your home in terms of the eggs you buy or whatever else you're going to do. So this national thing, and now at home, I'm asking my friends of the same party, and I guess that's sort of a chuckle to me on one side, because we really all in it together. It's not just about party. But I had to ask them, okay, give me some leadership on this. You're going begging to this guy that you are following, at least in certain areas, blindly, and now you're saying, oh, please, don't do this to us. Don't do that. Give us an exception here. Do this there. Why are we in this position? Doesn't make sense to me.
I've been asking this question to Republicans as well on this particular issue when it comes to just what's happening in Washington, which is, how long is too long when it comes to the economic turbulence before you have people that are supportive of the president, that may have voted for him? How long until, that really becomes problematic?
How long is, well, it's already
Let me rephrase the question.
Yeah.
How long is too long before you even start seeing people that are supportive of the president unable to defend some of these notions?
When University of Kentucky does wrong, breaks the rules in NCAA, brings in, uses some money to do this, or University of Louisville, whatever, and that's your team, do you run away from them? No. You stick with them. There's that level of people that stay with the team. They're not going anywhere. They're going to support to the end. They don't have to like it, but they're going to be with their team. And that happens on the other side of it as well. So it's right down there in the middle, and I'm just being conceptual here. It's right there in the middle. They refer to them euphemistically as independents. And these are folks that are not necessarily tied to the team, but they, will this work? Is this good for us, et cetera? And I'm giving them the best as well. And they float back and forth in terms of that. They don't like it, they see it, they're not tied necessarily to the team. They'll go the other way. And that's what you're seeing right now. Now, whether it stays there, we don't know. So you see people now saying, whoa, no. You look at the polls, for instance, now. You have this big swing. I mean, everything's going to fall out perfectly. We got a leader, a strong leader. But the fact of the matter is that now they say, whoa, we didn't ask for that. He promised this, but we're getting this. Oh, no. So you see them gravitating back in the other direction. They don't want that. Look how they treating immigrants. Think about this for a minute. Every state, Kentucky included, gets a benefit from folks coming in. So what do? They have some people come across undocumented, so they label them all as criminals of some sort. This generalization to promote a policy that is like an axe and a hatchet that damages people on multiple levels. It's not acceptable. So as people begin to see this, they say, whoa, that wasn't what I thought we were doing. I thought we were doing something else. I thought we were strengthening ourselves and uplifting people and being beneficial. Now they're understanding that with people coming from other countries, this is how this country was built. The question is, how do you manage that? How do you maintain that forward movement? How do you take the value? And how do you don't exploit people to their detriment and then throw them away when it doesn't work for you because you got some other plan? So, we're better than that. We're better than that, You got to have values. You got to be about something. You can't just walk into church on Sunday and praise the Lord and come out and do the devil's work. You got to think through this piece. We're not perfect. We got to think about it. We got to think of ways to come together. We got to think of ways to proceed with integrity. This is what I think we are about. This is part of the things that we have to aspire for. That may be a long answer. I could stay here all day saying this thing, but I'm going to tell you, we're better than that. We are much better than that. And I think we'll exhibit it at the end.
So sort of staying on national issues, but sort of taking it back down to Kentucky. We got a Senate race next year, and there's already a couple of folks that have jumped in. Just wondering what your general thoughts are on that race and perhaps the factors that may end up deciding who comes out the victor, at least in the primary a year from now.
Okay, well, let's start with the 6th Congressional District. That's Andy Barr.
Yeah.
What has he done? What has he done? He's just followed blindly behind what I just criticized from the leader, the President of the United States, who happens to be of the same party, who is saying this guy's fantastic. You got Daniel Cameron. Oh, this is unprecedented. This is wonderful. And yet we just got through talking about how that piece is adversely affecting and potentially damaging Kentucky. Look at Medicaid. They got a budget out there we got 1.5 million people depending on Medicaid in Kentucky. We're not a state that has the economic girth that California has, let's face it, which is now the fourth economy in the world. We're not that. And yet these policies that are coming to us adversely affect us, and we have someone that wants to move up and do their thing. And what are you doing? Who are you following? What are you putting on the table? I would have to, and when I say I mean everyone, regardless of party, we have to ask that question. How does that benefit us? What is being espoused by that individual that uplifts and strengthens our families? Because at the end of the day, this boils down to what happens in your home, in your community, the things that you think are important, the future and the aspirations you have for your children. How do you translate that and then just say, I just want to run because I got a statue? So just use that as an example. And I don't mean to just beat up on Andy Barr. I mean, but he's responsible to the voters. And he should answer these questions. He should be independent of leadership, make independent decisions, be critical where it's important to be critical, and not compromise those things. That's how you represent people. At least that's what I think.
there's a lot of speculation around, what our governor may do once his time in office has concluded, whether he may not, seek higher office or not. And I know that ultimately he's the one that can say whether or not he's doing that. But I do have a question for you over just, what happens for the Kentucky Democratic Party after that period, where Governor Beshear has sort of taken on this mantle of being the leader of the party. Who succeeds him in that, and what's the path forward for Kentucky Democrats to still hold strength in the
Well,
state?
let's get it straight. The governor is the leader of the party in Kentucky. That's the way that works. Okay, it's not just taking on the mantle. He is, and boy, am I proud of this governor. Here's an Andy I'm proud of. I mean, think about it. Here's a governor who comes in and runs a second term, gets much larger margin of victory, has support unprecedented in a red state, a blue governor in a blood red, ruby red state. And what that tells you is that here's someone that resonates with people. He has found out the combination of relationships of what people want. He talks the language that they understand. He has no hesitation of wearing his value in terms of his sleeves. I mean, he comes off as human as you can be, but yet he's consistent in terms of what he's trying to do. So you have someone here that I just got to tell you, I did not think that would be the case going into this piece, but every day I'm just amazed by the type of leadership he's providing. So your question implies that because this person who I think is a great leader, in fact, is respected nationally, has to go off the scene because of the restrictions we have on repeating office, that's going to collapse. We have all kinds of people out there with that kind of talent. But every time your leader moves on, that means you have to do some introspective work. That means you got to open up the door for debate and et cetera. And it's not going to be pretty sometimes. It's not going to be like a waltz or a dance. Sometimes it's going to be a little, a karaoke dance, not karaoke, perhaps. I was trying to use a Japanese term, but my point is this, is that we're going to be okay. What we have to do is engage. Again, we have an opportunity. We got to look to the future. We got to see what we need. We have to reevaluate what we've done and what we need to do. We need to communicate effectively with folks where they are and not way up here in a highfalutin way. They're not going to be able to do it like our Andy. They're not going to be able to do it just like that. He is him. He's unique. He's done a great job. But that mode is not the only mode for leadership. I think it's about if people think that you have their interests at heart, and if you understand what their interests are, then you have the fighting chance to represent that interest. And we have to get in there and fight for that. And we can't just assume that. So I'm optimistic. Again, I can't help that. That's the way it is. We got opportunity. We can make this work. I feel good about it.
Well, forgive me if my question came across as assuming anything, but I also want to challenge y'all a little bit too on
Come
the
on,
path
come on
forward.
with it.
But as we're wrapping up the interview, I always like throw a nice fun question out there to kind of put a cherry on top of these things. And since we're going into the Derby, this will be airing the morning after. What's your favorite part of this week in the spotlight being on Kentucky?
Wow. That's tough. I love Derby. I always did. But what Derby's a contradiction in my world and my perspective of it. And I see Derby as reflective of part of our journey as a society, quite frankly. So there's so much good about coming together, not just for political folks, anybody, the spirit of people coming together, having fun together, letting your hair down a little bit, doing something you might not do, but once a year, that's what we do in this particular regard. So it's great in that, and all those things that portends. But at the same time, it's a reflection of history that forced black jockeys out of this particular piece. There's money class that are held higher than others that may just walk through the door, which raises my eyebrows sometimes, well, all the time. And you know, you have this separation in terms of access to wealth and those kinds of things. So Derby is like a contradiction. But guess what? There's been some progress. We need to do more. And it's another one of those challenges. It's another one of those opportunities. So instead of taking a negative piece with respect to that, my thing is to challenge. Let's do better. Let's do better. We can do better. Let's keep in mind that we have to uplift individuals and people to be strong going forward. And if we're going to have values that we adhere to, then we're going to have to live those values. We have to demonstrate those values. And we can do it, and we've done it before. We've done it historically coming forward, and we can continue on that path.
All righty. Well, very well said, Senator Neal. Thank you so much for your time
It
today.
is absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.